It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're in our third segment this morning. It's December 3rd. We're going to talk a little bit about the crime of what we're doing in Afghanistan. There's a new article out this morning in CNS News, and I'll have a link in the subject matter section of the YouTube video. But this is up on our website. It's up on our Facebook page. You can find those by going to americasvoicenow.org. You can find them by going to our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. If you're a member of Facebook, click the like button. It helps us to spread the word not only to you, but also to your followers and listeners and friends. But the word out there this morning is that the stats are in. After 12 years of U.S. occupation, and it is occupation, Afghanistan is growing a record opium and poppy crop. Now, why would that be? Well, let's take a look at it in the real-world perspective. Before the war in Afghanistan, in 2000, the people in Afghanistan, which, by the way, has traditionally always been known as perhaps the biggest poppy developer or grower in the world. They always have been. They grew 82,000 hectares, of poppy. 82,000 hectares. It's the primary ingredient in heroin and opium. When the Taliban was in control in 2001, however, they grew a very, very limited amount because the Taliban said, hey, we don't want you growing this. They knocked that number way, way down. Now, I'm not giving the Taliban any credit here for anything other than the fact that during their rule, they had a recorded low of 7,000 hectares. 7,000. Right? Much lower than the 82,000 they were growing before the Taliban got control of the country. But now, under our tutelage, under our imperialistic rule, they're growing, get this, 209,000 hectares. So let's see. Let's just do that math for a moment. When the Taliban ran the place, they were at an all-time low. Correct? They were at an all-time low of 7,600. But then we came along and we knocked the Taliban out. And that number went up to 82,000. 10 times, 12 times the amount. And now they're growing 209,000, almost 3 times the amount they were growing before we kicked out, or after we kicked out the Taliban. That's hundreds of times more than they grew under the Taliban. Conclusion? The United States is using poppy and opium to make black op money. If you think for 1 minute that the trillions of dollars that are being expended by our government are not subsidized by the wholesale government-sponsored terrorism of drugs, you're very, very naive. The purpose, of course, is twofold. One, it generates an enormous amount of money that we can then use without congressional oversight, without anybody raising an issue or an alarm. And at the same point in time, it keeps the massive war on freedom and liberty funded. It keeps a requisite need to keep the war on drugs alive. They're funneling the drugs in, keeping the marketplace salted, and then turning around and saying, see, because there's so many drugs, we've got to crack down. We need to keep you safe from these drugs that we brought in. Not to mention the fact that they can continue over there to the delight of the military-industrial complex, who are selling literally trillions of dollars of equipment and gear and new gadgets and toys to the Pentagon and the DOD, who then turn around and say, after the equipment's been in place for serviceable for a year or two maybe, well, you know what? This stuff is worn out. And the contractors need new orders. So let's funnel it back to America and give it to the police departments and law enforcement agencies around the country. And then we'll siphon a few guys over there to show them how to use it, and we'll train them. And ultimately, we're building up cachets for the DHS's private army to go to war against American citizens. With billions upon billions upon billions of rounds of ammunition that they've acquired in an effort to dry it up from the marketplace. And now the EPA is going to regulate lead so you can't even make more. Ammo prices will be skyrocketing in 2014. Heroin use in the United States has grown by leaps and bounds. Where's it all coming from? Afghanistan. Where else? Do you know that the nation of Afghanistan has more lithium than any other place on Earth? You know what lithium is used for? Lots of things, but one of its primary uses is in the manufacture of batteries. Why is that so stunning, you ask? Well, when we're talking about alternative energy, you have to store it somewhere, don't you? That can't really be the reason. Okay. You may continue on in your naivete. It's all right. I understand. But the truth is, we're not over there for anything other than milking that nation of resources. The truth is, you have a better chance of being killed by a double strike of lightning than you do of being killed by a terrorist in the United States of America. The risk of you being killed by a foreign terrorist is infinitesimal. It is so microscopically small that you take greater risk driving to work. You have a greater risk crossing the street of being struck by a vehicle than you do of being killed by a terrorist. And yet we have spent trillions of dollars. We have sacrificed all of our rights, God-given, naturally bestowed upon us, for some ephemeral safety that doesn't exist. Really now? Is this the government? Is this the government that we broke away from England for? Is this the government that your fathers and my father died for? Or fought for? Or bled for? James Madison said to us, an elective despotism was not the government we fought for. We fought for one in which the powers of government would be divided and balanced among the several bodies so that no one could transcend their legal limits without being effectually checked and restrained by the others. And yet, we have a nation that has descended into lawlessness, approved by all three divisions, the executive, the judicial, the legislative. Where is the protection for the people from the NSA and the FBI, and then building dossiers and files on you and monitoring everything that you do? Where is the protection? There was a Canadian woman. She went to an airport in Canada for a United States flight. She was going to come to the United States so that she could get on a cruise ship and go somewhere for a vacation. But when she arrived at the airport in Canada and she had to check through customs, the TSA and the DHS agents there told her that she couldn't board the plane. She was diagnosed with, quote, depression. She had voluntarily placed herself into a facility for depression in the summer of 2012 for clinical depression. But when she got there, it turned out that the TSA and the DHS had gone through and read a lot about her on Google. She had written a document, or a book, that documented how she had become paralyzed. And that as a result of that paralysis, she'd suffered a lot of bouts of depression. Well, who wouldn't, right? I'll never walk again. I'll never be able to move freely. Life sucks. So she checked herself into a hospital, and they used that as a reason to say, sorry, you can't come. She would be a threat. That because of her mental illness episode, that they was found out through their, quote, system checks, which was public online information, that she would be required to undergo medical evaluation by a DHS-approved doctor before she could come into the United States and be accepted to just come here to travel to get on a boat. She's not alone. My point, then, the reason I tell you this is because you are sitting there saying to yourself, this guy has got a tinfoil hat on a half-inch thick. He's telling me that I should be worried about all this data they're capturing and they're building dossiers on me, and I don't buy it. Okay. You don't think that all this data that's being collected and bought and stolen and stored on you is a cause for worry? Au contraire, mon frère. Because what you don't know is that even innocents will suffer at the hands of tyrants. And you don't know yet exactly what tool they'll use against you. Will it be some hospitalization? Some psychiatrist you saw 10, 15 years ago when a marriage dissolved or a child passed away? Maybe a parent. Will it be some incident in your past that you thought everybody had forgotten about? That little run-in you had with the local police? Will it be some email that you've been transmitting back and forth between you and someone who's not your husband or your wife? Will it be a business deal that was a little sketchy, but wasn't really illegal? It was just a little sketchy, but can now be used to open an investigation. And that's when the pressure begins, you see, because then it's, listen, if you want this all to go away, here's what you got to do. Just like the guy at the Air Force Academy. The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, we are done as a nation of freedom and liberty. It doesn't exist anymore. We now live in a police state. And you don't want to see it for what it is. Because human nature has this failing. You see, here's what it is. It says that when I see a problem, when I step away from my denial, and I finally acknowledge it exists, I have to do something about it. And your fear and your trepidation and your refusal to get involved is your denial of its existence. But you don't have to look far to see the results. You see, down in Venezuela, they have a dictator down there. And lately, he's been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He capped the amount of money of profit that could be made on the sale of a car. He's opened up stores and forced them to lower their prices, and at gunpoint, forced those stores to sell at 1/10 of the public price because they were evil profiteers. And yet the other day, while he was out there touting how wonderful this all was, the electricity went out throughout the whole nation. There's a power outage that plunged the whole country into darkness. Well, USA, we should take note, because under President Obama's plan, electricity prices will necessarily skyrocket. That's his quote, not mine. And he's now cut 60% of our power generation from coal, which we have an ample supply of. But it doesn't meet his global worldly agenda. And it doesn't force necessarily skyrocketing electric prices, which draws money away from you, which means that you don't have the resources to be able to defend yourself and fight back. It means that you don't have the resources to go out and buy another case of ammunition. It means that you don't have the resources to be able to buy some extra food to put into your basement to take care of your family. It means that you don't have the time to take off from work to go to a protest. It keeps you at the wheel of slavery, endlessly pushing that wheel around and around and around. grinding your fellow Americans into flour so that they can be made into bread for the elitists who run and rule this planet. He's replaced 60% of our power generation of coal with 12% wind and solar and geothermal. Well, what about the missing 48% of our energy? Our future will look identical to Venezuela's. Skyrocketing prices, deflation of our currency, inflation of everything that you buy, massive unemployment, and the government telling you how good things really are. All you got to do is read what the citizens of Venezuela have to say. They're not very happy. In fact, they're deeply concerned. I feel so frustrated, angry, and impotent, says a sales advisor. I live far away, and here I am stuck under the rain. Something's going wrong that they're not sorting out. The government needs a plan B. This is just not normal. And the government comes out and says, I have no doubt that today's electricity sabotage is part of the right wing's plan of extremism. Well, it's so obvious when it happens in a foreign country. But why aren't you looking at it happening in your own backyard? We're fighting foreign wars. We have no business being there. We've completely ignored Mr. Washington when he said to us, avoid foreign entanglements. Be friends with everyone, but don't sign international agreements and alliances that will commit you to agendas that are not your own. And the real reason we're over there is because we get to funnel drugs into this country so that we can continue the war on drugs, and then we get to utilize the reason we're over there to keep on pumping the war on terror. All of it, meanwhile, is subjugating you, stealing your rights, stealing your liberties, stealing your freedoms under the guise of the adage, we're keeping you safe. When I was a kid growing up in the East Coast, that's what the gangster would say when he walked into the store and the store owner said, hey, listen, I don't really need protection because I've never been robbed. And the hulking enforcer would stand up and say, yo, you don't understand. You need protection from us. We want our 20%. We'll be right back.